Hello there, my name's Scott. Today I'm going to be doing a review on the Nzonic V5, which I received from www.schmovapes.co.uk. Before I start though, I must point out I did receive it free of charge for the purpose of conducting a review, but my opinion of the product remains true, honest and accurate as always. Okay, let's go straight ahead and show you what's in the box. Okay, so the Nzonic V5 is going to come in a small presentation box, and inside the box you're going to find the actual device, an additional telescopic tube, an additional button, and a soft carrying pouch. Okay, so here I have the Nzonic V5, which is manufactured in the Philippines and made out of 304 grade stainless steel, with the exception of a bit of brass here, which is in the switch housing, and copper contacts in both the switch as well as the top cap. Build quality, absolutely fantastic, can't fault it at all, with the exception of one very minor criticism, which I will cover as we progress. So it's a telescopic device, and this means you can use a range of batteries. You can use an 18350, an 18500 or an 18650, and if you like your regulated vaping, you can also use every one of those battery combinations with a kick. The top cap on this particular version is completely flat. I believe other versions had a sort of chamfered edge. As you can see, it's completely flat here and 22mm in diameter, so that means it's going to look great with all your 22mm atomizers. Going around the top has quite deep engraving. I believe the design is taken from the Filipino flag. Uses a 510 atomizer connector, so it's going to be compatible with all your 510 atomizers, and it uses a free floating copper center pin. So this means that as it is free floating, all your atomizers can sit completely flush on the end there, no gaps whatsoever. Going around the top cap, which is this whole section from here to here, by the way, you're going to find these nice decorative grooves, and you're also going to find one of the several ventilation holes. So this means if you do happen to have a dodgy battery venting gases, then those gases can escape. On the side of the body you're going to find the company logo, and normally I would say engraved into the metal, but according to the website it uses a very special technique known as pressed EVM to engrave the mod. And as far as I can tell, what that means is it's actually sort of pressed into the metal rather than sort of traditionally engraved. And like I said, the main body is telescopic, and this means you can use different length batteries. On the bottom, you're going to find your bottom button switch, and on the actual button itself, you're going to find the company name engraved, your serial number, and a rather attractive crystal. Not too sure why they added the crystal, not really my sort of thing to be quite honest, but obviously different people like different things, and someone else may really like it. Now, when I first got the Nzonic V5, which was probably over 7 weeks ago now, I took it out of the box, put a battery in, put the switch into position, and basically it just automatically started firing up the atomizer. And what the problem was is that the button itself, the shaft was just way too long, so I had to sort of get a file out and shave it down in order for it to stop automatically firing. So I wrote off to Schmovapes, who then wrote off to Modz, and explained to them the issues I was having with the switch, and they then sort of done a little bit of a redesign and then sent out new buttons for everybody, which has then obviously rectified that problem. So I'm going to assume that if you did get one of these, it's going to come with the correct button fitted, and it's going to fire up perfectly, no problems whatsoever. But with the additional button, if you do want to use that, you will need to sand it down a little bit. Going around the outside, you can see you have more ventilation holes, so again it's just going to aid you if you did happen to have a dodgy battery venting gases. And it uses a reverse threaded locking ring, so at the moment it's open, I can press the button in, it's going to fire up. If I want to lock it off, give that a spin, and that's it, it's now locked. Now this is probably my only very slight criticism, and that is the actual locking ring works perfectly, but it does feel a little bit on the loose side. It just feels like it's like maybe the threads are sort of slightly too large, so there is quite a little bit of a movement now, but again that is probably my only slight criticism with regards to build quality. Uses opposing magnets rather than the spring. So inside here you have two magnets which are obviously repelling each other, and as you push it in, the magnet repels it back out again. The throw of the switch, probably only 1mm, 2mm, fires up absolutely perfectly though. You can press it right on the edge, it's going to fire up, and you can press it right in the middle, it's going to fire up every single time. Okay, so here I have all the parts that make up the Nzonic V5. So you have the top cap, then the telescopic tube, the main body, and then finally the bottom button switch. Now, like I said, the Nzonic can be used with an 18350 battery, an 18500 or an 18650. And if you like to have your regulated vaping, you can also use a kick with every single one of these batteries as well. Now, if you're going to use the 18350 or 18500, you can use the smaller telescopic tube. But if you're going to use the larger 18650, 18650 plus kick or 18500 plus kick, then you need to use the larger telescopic tube. Okay, so to assemble the Nzonic V5, I'm just going to take the switch assembly and screw that into the base of the body. Now, as I'm going to be using an 18500 battery, I'm going to take the smaller of the two telescopic tubes and screw that into the opposite end. But I'm not going to screw it all the way down, just to around sort of halfway. I'm then going to take my battery, and I like to use these AWIMRs. I'm just going to insert the negative end in towards the switch. Now, as the top cap uses a free floating centre pin, I like to attach the atomizer first before sort of putting it onto the actual device. So I'm just going to take my sat Bernati and screw that all the way down so you've got no gap there whatsoever. And then finally you can take the top cap and screw that onto the other end of the telescopic tube. Now, when you start to screw this up, you want to keep going until you can feel a little bit of resistance. Once you get that resistance, it's basically going to be doing two things. One is going to get rid of the battery rattle, and secondly, it's going to be gradually pushing the copper centre pin up to make contact with the centre pin of your atomizer and obviously ensure a good connection. So I'm just going to screw that up. So I've got a bit of resistance there, no battery rattle, everything's firing up and no gaps. Okay, so that is the Nzonic V5. Let's go ahead, see what it vapes like. Okay, so that was the Nzonic V5, and what I'll do now is go ahead and show you in action. Now, the battery came with the charge around 30 minutes ago, and I have been having a bit of a vape with a nice cup of tea prior to recording, so the voltage would have dropped off a little bit, but I'm going to assume it's still around sort of 3.8 to 4 volts. I'm going to be using it with a Satburn Atty, which is a Genesis style atomizer. Not too sure what the resistance of the coil is, but I'm going to guesstimate somewhere between 1 and 1.2 ohms. And I've got the tank filled up with some 18mg strength tobacco flavoured e-liquid, and it's just a PG e-liquid. Okay, so this is the Nzonic V5. And as you can see, vapor-wise, getting plenty of vapour out of it. Like I always say, you have to bear in mind that the amount of vapour you're going to get will be totally down to what sort of atomizer or cartomizer you actually stick on the end of it. But nevertheless, with the SEP I've got here, getting plenty of vapour, flavour and throw hit. Okay, I'll start then talking about the build quality. And I really can't fault it at all. It's an excellent device. The machining is top quality. The finish is absolutely beautiful on it. The only very minor criticism for me is the locking ring. Now, it does work perfectly. There's nothing wrong with it in that sense. The only sort of slight criticism is that the threads do feel a little bit loose. So when the actual locking ring is in between being locked and being sort of fully open, it does get a little bit of a rattle, but obviously you're not going to be leaving it in the middle. It's either going to be locked or fully open. And once it's fully open, no rattle. Once it's fully locked, no rattle. You know, so there's no sort of issues there at all. But when it is sort of being screwed up or down, it does feel as though it's a little bit on the loose side. But again, it's not going to affect its performance whatsoever. And other than that, I really can't fault the build quality at all. The threads are really nice. You know, very good quality. There's no sort of rough edges or burrs. The finish came to me in a sort of pristine condition, and it's got a really nice brushed finish on it as well. Hides the old fingerprints nicely. So yeah, in terms of sort of build quality, machining and the finish, you know, can't fault it at all, apart from a slightly rattly locking ring when it's halfway between being locked and being fully open.
Battery life. Now, as it is telescopic, it allows you to use an 18350 battery, which is the sort of smallest ones, an 18500 or an 18650. And you can also use a kick with every single one of those batteries as well. Now, if you want to keep the device down to a nice sort of minimal size, obviously you're going to go for the 18350, but you will have the sort of shorter battery life out, the 3 battery options. If you want to have the longer battery life, obviously you're going to have to go for the 18650, but it does make it quite a long device like that though, especially if you're going to use it with a kick. If you're going to use it 18650 plus a kick, then the overall length does sort of become sort of truncheon proportions, basically. It becomes very long indeed. Me personally, I like to use it in with the 18500 batteries. It's a nice sort of combination of fairly good battery life, as well as sort of keeping it to a nice sort of decent size as well, or at least for my sort of big old hands. If you're a very light user, you could probably make one of those 18350 batteries last you the full day. But if you're like a chain vapor, you're going to be going through loads of those 18350s a day. So obviously if you're a very heavy vapor, 18500 or 18650 is definitely going to be the better option for you. The switch is, again, an excellent switch. Now it's been sorted out, because when I first got the Nzonic, you know, I put the battery in, I screwed the switch all the way up, and as soon as the switch, the actual sort of the actual switch assembly sort of, you know, made a sort of full contact, so there was no sort of gap there between the switch and the main body. As soon as that happened, the atomizer started firing. And it's because the centre pin on the button was just probably about 1 millimetre too long. So as soon as it screwed up, the contact pin was making contact with the copper contact. How many times can I say the word contact? And obviously that was just completing the circuit and is obviously firing up the atomizer. So what I had to do was basically just get a file out and shave off, like I said, probably about 1 millimetre, maybe 1.5 millimeters, something like that. And after that, you know, it did work perfectly fine. But I thought to myself, you know, should I mention this or not? Because it is quite a sort of serious sort of negative. So I did write off to Schmo Vapes. They then went and checked all their stock and found quite a few of them had the same issue. They then wrote to Madz Vapes, and then from that point onwards, Madz Vapes, or whatever they're called, ended up making up a whole load of new buttons, which were obviously a little bit shorter, and sent them out to everybody, and that solved the issue. So if you did get one now, it is going to come with a fully functional button, no problems whatsoever, or touch wood anyway. And so now it has been sorted out. It really is a fantastic switch. It's very responsive. You can press it right in the middle, right on the very edge. It's going to fire up sort of fully every single time as well. There's no wobble in there. You can stand it upright without locking it, and it won't fire up the atomizer. The throw is probably only about 1 millimetre or 2 millimetres at the most, so it's a really nice action on now. It is, it's not a feather-light touch to activate. You do have to sort of press it a little bit sort of firmly, but nothing that's going to be sort of too much of a major hardship for you. Of course, I do find that the switches where it uses like opposing magnets do tend to be a little bit tougher to press in compared to ones that use a spring. But compared to other magnetic switches, it's probably one of the easiest actions that I've come across so far. So, you know, the actual switch, you know, works absolutely flawlessly. And again, it's not really to do with the switch as such, but the only criticism is obviously that slightly wobbly locking ring, but that doesn't actually affect the performance of the switch at all, though. Okay, so, you know, the things I like about it, I love the look, I love the feel of it. It's a really nice weight. It's not overly heavy, but you're feeling as though you're holding something nice and sort of substantial in your hand, so to speak. The finish on it is a fantastic finish. I love the engraving. It's one of these EVM or EMV pressed engraving, so I'm not too sure what that actually entails, but to me it sounds like it's sort of stamped in rather than actually engraved in. But it's only a strange little sort of symbol for their company logo, but it does look really nice. So I like the sort of quite minimal amount of brass. I do like my stainless steel mods, but having a little splash of brass again does make it look really nice. The switch works fantastic. It's telescopic, so you can use different batteries. You've got the 3 floating centre pin there, copper contacts, which obviously allow you to have your atomizer to sit sort of completely flush on the end with no gaps. You've got no battery rattle. You know, literally the only slight negative I've got is the slightly wobbly or rattly locking ring. But even that, it really is not much of a big deal at all, and it doesn't affect the performance of the device in any way, shape or form. Really not too sure what else I can tell you about it. If you fancy trying one out for yourself, go along to www.schmovapes.co.uk. Thank you very much for watching. Also come along and visit my website at www.e-cig-reviews.com, and it's e-cig-reviews.com. Cheers guys, happy vaping, see you later.